Okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Catherine Zack, and this is the Beyond Balance podcast. I first had the idea for this podcast at the beginning of 2019. The beginning of 2019, I was 5 years into my life and my career after quitting my job as a corporate lawyer in Washington, D.C. to teach meditation and mindfulness instead. I was 5 years into this shift, and I had built a really beautiful business in DC around meditation and mindfulness and teaching people how to relax, because it turns out DC is a town that is filled with fellow type A plus high achieving, high performing, high stress perfectionists like me, who are at least beginning to wonder, like, if there is something else beyond this ever elusive balancing act, beyond kind of building a life that just looks successful on paper, beyond our professional job titles and credentials and things like that. And there's just no shortage of those people in Washington, D.C. So I was very grateful. And I decided to buy a podcasting mic and start a podcast that would give me the chance to expand that conversation beyond just the people that I could reach in person. Well, turns out I was too busy to add one more thing to an already busy life and full life at that point. So the podcasting mic just started collecting dust, as it were. So cut to March of 2020. And my husband and our 2.5-year-old son at the time, we left Washington, D.C., and we ended up at a Best Buy. And I ended up buying an even fancier podcasting mic. And this is right before the world shut down. And I thought, yes, this is the time that I can launch the podcast and have this conversation and reach more people and talk about the kind of edges of our life where, it seems like we're checking all the right boxes, but there's still this sense of like, is this enough? Is this what I wanted for my life? But of course, like many of you, I didn't have childcare. I was home with my child, navigating this world of pandemic living, and it turns out it was not the right time for me to launch this podcast. So that brings us to the end of 2021, and it's finally happening. The Beyond Balance podcast is here, and it's not because now is suddenly the perfect time. And I finally figured it all out. No, 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 no. I actually just had my second child 8 weeks ago. So I've got a newborn at home with me. But I'm showing up here in this kind of imperfectly, never the right time kind of way. Because I have to, right? I have to walk the walk if this is the kind of conversation that I want to have with you all here, that I think is so important to have. This conversation that brings us kind of beyond the myth of something like balance that feels ever elusive, beyond the things like perfectionism and a very specific version of productivity, or success, a specific definition of success that just kind of leaves us feeling like we're doing it wrong. Like, if I want to have these conversations with you in the podcast, I have to be able to show up exactly as I am. So here I am in this moment, with an 8-week-old at home that I'm, with full time, same podcasting mic from 2020, and a lot of enthusiasm and energy to have these conversations with you. And so grateful that you're here to have them with me, because I know I'm not the only one who's now quit their corporate job. I know I'm not the only one who's reimagining what building a life looks like, what balancing or finding some kind of semblance of relationship between our work and our life and who we are and how we want to show up. I know I'm not the only one doing that work of reimagining. I know that so many of you are too. And I hope that this podcast can become a way that we can go beyond the kind of like what we want to leave behind, but what we don't want to take with us into the future, and begin to fill in the answer to that question of what's next, of what could we do instead. with the conversations that we'll have here, with the practices that we'll get up to. And I wanted to call this Beyond Balance because, again, I think this balance is a myth that keeps us trapped. It's one of many that makes us just feel bad about ourselves. And I think what this podcast will bring us to is something that lies even beyond balance, which only takes into account the things in our life that we can like put a number on or track or find an ROI for. And we know that our lives are composed of so much more that lives beneath the surface that we can't quantify, right? We can't quantify, but is nonetheless important. That's more textured, it's more nuanced, it's richer. And that's where I want to go. That's where I want to go with this podcast. That's where I want to go with these conversations, beyond the myth of balance, beyond the badge of busyness, the stress of creating a life that looks successful based on someone else's shoulds, right? Someone else's list of shoulds. I want to take us beyond that. Beyond the trap of perfectionism that just leaves us feeling exhausted, quite frankly, and like we're never going to be good enough. So if you'd like to to meet me at a place beyond those things, I'd love to have you listen along and also help me co-create this podcast and conversation. I really want to hear from you and know what these topics bring up for you, where your questions are, where your edges of growth are, where your frustrations are, where you're learning deep lessons too. I want to be able to build this as a conversation with you that includes that all too. So let's go there together. I hope this podcast is the way that we can do that. A journey towards wholeness instead of just balance, right? A journey towards wholeness where all the parts of our lives, even the parts that feel like they're conflicting or in tension, can be together, can exist together, and don't have to compete, right? Don't have to compete. So you can subscribe now. You can invite friends to listen along. I know that many of you are having conversations with each other about these topics. And you can visit catherinezack.com/beyond balance to join the conversation, to add your voice to the conversation, and also find some ways that we can work together to take these ideas out of the podcast realm and into action in your own life. I really can't wait to have these conversations. I'm so happy to finally be here, right? Things take the time they take and we can show up exactly as we are. I hope that's what I'm offering you as I do it myself today. Welcome to the Beyond Balance podcast. Let's go there together. Thank you for listening.